Hello everybody and welcome to the 4th episode of Coffee Talk. I guess it can be called the 4th episode because I tried to record one a couple of days ago with another great person, which is Saran McNulty, but that audio file is lost forever, mostly because the quality wasn't all that good. So it might be a little sad and you might be getting this 2 days later, but you know what? At the same time, you're now getting a better podcast out of it. So, yeah. And the person you're saying, ooh, is Ilya. I've already forgot to say your last name again.
It's Pales. It's
Pales.
Great. It's
Eli
fine.
Pales, yeah. Of Enthusiast Gaming? Is it now?
Yep. Our company's name's called Enthusiast Gaming, but you might know me from Nintendo Enthusiast. We got the YouTube channels. We got the website. It's all fancy schmancy. Yeah, I'm happy to be here today. Thanks for inviting me, Dan. I'm Daan. Sorry.
Yeah, we already both said your name right in the first couple of minutes. This is great. This is fantastic. I love it.
Man, I had to catch myself. I feel so bad.
It's fine. It's fine. You've done it multiple times in a day. It feels natural for me for you at least to say my name at least wrong runs. You know. If not, it wouldn't feel right for some reason.
Yeah, you wouldn't know you're talking to an American, right?
Well, no, but at the same time, I wouldn't know I would be talking to you because the first time we meet, every single time you do say my name wrong.
I do, and then I have to correct myself. But I hit it the first time I said, "Hey Don," right when we pulled it up, I was spot on.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking, and then I got lazy and sloppy.
But we haven't talked for a while, but your individual website, so Enthusiast, Nintendo Enthusiast and what have you, have been turned into, what is now, Enthusiast GG?
Yeah, so we're in a beta phase, and it's still in development. It's going slowly in development, but the way it works is if you visit enthusiast.gg, GG stands for good game, you can go and you can write your own posts, submit your own content, and a little bit like YouTube, you actually get revenue based off the views you get on the website.
Nice.
And the website actually, because we've been slacking a little bit on Nintendo Enthusiast, Enthusiast.gg has actually been performing pretty well, getting more page views than Nintendo Enthusiast, incidentally enough. So, you know, it's a good platform there. We share good content on our Facebook page. So, yeah, I mean, most of our reviews and features and everything still goes on Nintendo Enthusiast, but Enthusiast Gaming is definitely where we try to allow people to give them a platform to share their video content and other creative works.
Yeah, I always like that concept because Kotaku has something similar, Kotaku in Action, and some initial good stuff came from Kotaku in Action, but I feel that platform has been lacking a little bit in the last couple of years, and it feels good to see a new platform try to go for that same audience, like an audience that just really wants to write, but doesn't necessarily have a stake in the video game industry in a large way. But so I think it's a really good idea to just do that, you know. But it also kind of blurs the lines in some points because you also actually get some, I would say, some really good content out of it. I've been browsing around and it's some really good stuff there.
Yeah, and we really try to make an effort to look through and pick out good pieces of content to share on the Facebook page. And I have a good friend of mine who I also do a podcast with. And he just wrote up an article. I forgot on what it was, but you know, good headline, good article. And I ended up going on and sharing it on our page. Got 10,000 reach on Facebook, so a lot of people were looking at it and reading on it. And I mean, that's just an example, but I think that we really try to go through. A lot of our editors read through what's written, and we really try to make sure that really good work is highlighted. Awesome.
But of course, there's still Nintendo Enthusiast if you just want to have like the regular stuff you used to.
We don't do news as much anymore on Nintendo Enthusiast. We're trying to get more news over there, but a lot of, if you're just looking for our reviews and features, then sorry for this huge advertisement. 5 minutes.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But that site's still there. You know, we're still going to be sending. Someone will probably go to E3. We'll have a few people, but we can talk about that maybe later in the show. But I might not be at E3 this year, and we'll see.
Yeah, I think we should actually address this now, because I've been in the last 3 episodes. I've been mentioning E3 a lot too. You know, and I've said that this year would be my last year, and I've revised those plans because I'm not going to E3 at all anymore this year.
How did you come to your decision?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I think and this is a harsher one to discuss, but this is a more personal podcast, so I feel I can share it, My medical situation has become worse over the last year, especially concerning my health and my balance. And my balance is actually the worst segment of that entire disease that I have. The last 3 weeks I've been to the hospital 5 times for visits. And the choice that I've made came after those 5 visits, and even though it's going better now than a couple of weeks ago, I am feeling not in the mood to A, have a concussion while going to America, doing a different part of the world, and B, also dealing with all the monetary issues that goes along with that, because it's a lot of money to spend, especially for somebody who doesn't come from America. And spending a buttload of money on a trip to America and back doesn't seem like the best investation of my money. So I've made a call, I would say about a week ago, that I'm not going to E3, even though before I definitely said I would. And there are some other stuff that pushed me more forward in the direction of that decision. And people could say, well, obviously it has to do with political. I think that's the least interesting reason why I'm not going. With the whole thing about it going public, and the thing about all the rumors that are going on around E3, and the whole cycle that leads up to it, and the disappointment I felt after the last 2 E3s I went. It is a more well thought through decision at every point, and I think I've made the right one.
Yeah, I mean, health is definitely the most important factor, so I definitely think that that's a good decision on that end. And that's not why, obviously my decision was based off that, but
sure, yeah,
and it's important. I mean, the money aspect's a whole nother one. Coming from Europe is hard. It's a long trip. You spend a day going back and forth. It's pricey to go to all the way to the West Coast. I mean, New York is one thing. The West Coast is a whole nother.
Sure.
And, hotel and food, and it builds up. And I don't know how much, money you spent on a trip, or if you want to talk about it. But it's really, for me, going to E3 was always easy because flights to and from Denver, which is where I'd usually fly out of, were $200 round trip, and then I'd find a crappy motel to stay in, and in the end, maybe I spent $400 and I made all of it back plus writing. But for you coming from Europe, it's hard, not only in the health aspect but financially. Looking at the cost, I mean, I imagine it's probably $1,500, $2,000.
Something like that in that range, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and just looking at that, and you're like, all right. I'm a content producer, which is great, but then you start thinking about, all right, I got to figure out my health situation, which costs a lot of money, and how much more content could I produce if I had this money for other things? I could put it towards a better camera, a better mic, or more time for videos.
Well, also in a couple of weeks, I will spend a buttload of money on a new Nintendo system, so...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that you're one of the most hardworking Nintendo journalists out there, if not the most hardworking. You pump out content on stuff that other people won't touch. You put out videos for all the themes. Who does that? That's incredible. And in order to, if you're putting this money towards like those obscure eShop games that nobody's talking about, that's a service to the viewers. That's a service to the developers. And I think that's really valuable. And you gotta applaud the ability to put that money into something that's really going to create a lot of value, because there's 1,000 journalists that go to E3 and are all putting out previews on the same game, but not everyone's out there pumping out videos on the stuff that Daan does. So
I agree. At the same time, it's also a really hard decision, because E3 going is also the only time of year where I'll see a lot of American people that I usually don't see, and most of them have become friends over the last number of years. So it's also the social aspect that really is really hard on me. So overall, it was just a really hard decision to make. But it's honestly, I think in the long term, it's for the better. Right now, it just kind of blows.
Yeah, definitely, and who knows? We'll see what E3 brings. You know, there might be a ton of Switch titles and stuff like that. Networking with other people, meeting other people at parties, and all the like. You know, every year we go to the Indie Mixer. You meet a ton of eShop developers, and you get to know them really well. There was a guy I met at this mixer at last E3 who had a development studio in Colorado, so I ended up driving up to meet him last summer at his studio. And yeah, those connections are definitely really valuable and important, and you don't really realize how big the industry is and how much you don't know until you go to the other side of the world. And that's definitely really valuable. And I remember when I went to Gamescom 2 years ago, I just didn't even realize the scope of the industry in Europe and how big it was. And just meeting all the European developers, Polish developers, from Eastern Europe, it's a whole nother scale. So I definitely understand the value of going to E3 and seeing the whole other world in the industry. But I forgot. I don't know how many E3s you've been to, but they start smudging together after you've been.
I've been to every E3 since 2012.
So yeah, so there you go. I started going in 2014, so you got 2 years on me, and even from these last 3 years, they're smudging together. You know, you start not being able to tell them apart so much, and the people you meet are really important, but the E3s themselves start blending in.
No, for sure, and ultimately. The thing that I want to take away from this is that I am not against going to E3. Like, people have been kind of moving away from E3 because they don't feel it represents them well anymore. For me, it's a combination of being more social towards an industry that I'm really interested in, and just playing games that it won't be out for a little while, and just see them and just talk about them for sure. And considering I don't really get to do that outside of maybe a post-E3 event in my own country, kind of stinks, but it's... Again, I do think it's a good decision to just wait and see. Maybe if the last moment and somehow a bag of money arrives, then I might still go to E3. But, I'm not really guaranteeing that, especially with the periods that are coming and the games that are likely I need to cover, and then when the time comes to E3, it's maybe better one time to just wait and see how it goes from home, because outside of Mario, we don't really know what's going to be there at E3 anyway. Yeah.
And practically speaking, I mean, if I'm based off my decision to probably not go to E3.
Yeah, sure. Why are you not going to E3 then? I would like to know that too, for sure.
Sure. So part of it's a spoiled aspect. I think part of it is, the politics of letting in 15,000 attendees. And, this would be even more challenging for you, but looking at the crowds and stuff, and when you've got medical issues and balance and all that, that must be even more difficult when, getting from Sony to Nintendo on the show floor is just such a pain in the butt. You've got Atlas there, which always has crowds, because they have a stage show-ish, and Nintendo did too last year. And it's just a sheer number of people getting around the convention center is kind of impractical. And, most journalists set up appointments, so we don't really have to wait in line. But even then, going to see some of the smaller games that don't have that you can't really set up appointments with, or don't have their own booths, or might be in the indie booth or whatever it is. I think it makes things more challenging, and meeting other people is more challenging as a result. That might just be the spoiled aspect, but also I think I'm going to be doing an internship or something this summer, and practically speaking, I don't know whether I can take a week off from whatever I end up doing. If I might get an internship in the industry, I had an interview with Insomniac Games a few days ago, which was actually really cool.
Nice.
So I might end up at E3 through one of those means. But as a journalist, I don't know. We'll probably not, just because of the challenge of getting there from the East Coast now, since I don't live in Colorado, I live in Michigan. And so I mean, all these problems are 10 times harder for you because coming from Europe, having all, but still that's probably the reason why. But I do love the social aspects. The idea of meeting up. Our site always brings we have a good presence. I think we had 8 writers last year. And having the crew together is really cool. Going out to eat, seeing you, going out to eat with you, that's definitely something I really value, and it will be unfortunate to miss out on that. But I'm going to try to definitely make it next year, though, because next year I turn 21, and that's the year when you can actually go to parties and meet people.
Well, we have to put an asterisk behind that, in the United States.
Yeah, and asterisk in the United States. Because when I went to Gamescom, I had no problem going out and meeting cool developers and all that. But yeah, in the United States, they're crazy about that. And even like the Sony press conference, you have to be 21 plus to go. So I can get into the Sony press conference. Yeah. And a lot of our writers are younger than 21. Last year, I think out of the 8 people, 3 or 4 were even under 21. So we couldn't get into the Sony press conference, and that's just really strange.
Yeah, it's a shame because there's a lot of also good young people. I actually started at the age of 16, so I know exactly what I'm talking about, For me, when I started, it was just a drive out of interest in seeing where I land, but then 10 years later, it's now much more than a hobby. It becomes like a part of your life every single day. So of course I will never be able to stop writing or talking about games because I love it too much. And I can definitely see, for somebody who's under 21 and able to go to E3, I feel the blow of not being able to seems like a harsh one.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot that E3 does right, and I really like the fact that, there's an age requirement of 17 to get into E3, which I think is fine. That's great.
Yeah.
But, sitting in the media room and talking to other journalists, a lot of them from really big mainstream publications, I think we all follow Joe Foreman on, I think that's his name, on Twitter. But he's from the Chicago Tribune, and it's just really cool to meet other people like that, and then other Nintendo journalists. So in that respect, I think it's cool as a young person to go to E3 and also interview people from these big companies. Doing an interview with someone from Nintendo is just insanely cool if you're a young person at E3. But you definitely do miss out a lot when it comes to the after hours, because these parties aren't just parties. They've got big people there that you can introduce yourself to and meet and talk to, which is really cool.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Not just big people, other just developers too, and meeting them and talking about their games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it becomes more personal after hours than it is during the actual E3 hours. So having those experiences there is actually way more important than you might think from the outside.
Definitely.
Yeah, but so I'm not going to E3, so now you know. Do whatever if you want.
It'll be interesting to see if there's any sort of reaction. Like, will there be less journalists this year? Or I guess since they're letting in more YouTubers, or are YouTubers getting press credentials? Like, how is that all going to work? It'll be interesting to see how the show plays out, and whether those 15,000 extra people. I guess last year they let in 3,000.
One of my best friends is a really big relative. Is almost 100,000 people on YouTube, and then he daily streams on Twitch. And he told me that he is not going either because it seems too busy for him. And I can see that, for sure.
Yeah, my big fear is just that, this year probably won't be too bad. 15,000 people, that's about an extra 30%, which sounds like a lot, but, I mean, compared to some of these other shows that are 70, 80,000 people, even more, Gamescom is 300,000. Like, it's not terrible, but I'm just afraid that if this trend continues, like if they move it to a bigger convention center and let in, 50,000 people, then I think that's going to be really problematic.
Yeah. Then it turns officially into Gamescom.
Oh my gosh. Just remember, I still have mental scars from Gamescom. seeing those waits in the Nintendo booth where people were waiting 6 or 7 hours to play Xenoblade Chronicles X. That was something.
Yeah, luckily I was there during the press morning, because they don't even have a press day anymore now. It is a press morning.
Oh.
So I had to play all the stuff that I wanted to play in that first morning. And that's usually Nintendo stuff, obviously. So I played Xenoblade Chronicles X then, which was interesting because it was not shown before, and we got the chance to actually sit down and see an English version, which is all sorts of amazing. And there are sometimes those kind of Gamescom surprises where one or two games were barely shown at E3 but suddenly pop up at Gamescom, but most of the time it is just the stuff that was there from E3.
Yeah. Well, there were a few games. Yeah, I think Final Fantasy Explorers, that was the first time I played that game too.
Yeah, that was the first time showable during Gamescom, yeah.
So, I mean, that's cool. And Nintendo had a big presence. I was surprised. They had a decent amount of space. I just wish that they had more booths and stuff for the actual. I mean, there were, I think, 4 TVs for Xenoblade, maybe 8. And the lot just couldn't compete. I mean, if you give each person half an hour, like, there's that time starts building up real quick.
Yeah, for sure. You can't really help it. I think they did it well with Zelda last year, where only select people could play it. But outside of what you have to win tournaments, you have to actually participate in the stuff on their booth. It was actually really clever and smart to do, because you're not causing too many problems at your own booth while doing that. But it's also a tricky thing, because there will be plenty of people, well, why not replace all the games you had there with just Zelda? Because all of the other games that were standing there were a few eShop titles which were a lot of fun, but for the rest of the Wii U space were just basically all of those tournaments. So they could have put like a bunch load of Zelda demo pods there and it would have been fine. But at the end of the day, it's naturally Nintendo that decides, and it might have been, well, we soon have a new console to talk about, so why not focus on that instead of showing Zelda right now here on Wii U. It's a really difficult thing to say, honestly. And looking back at it now, it's crazy how quick that cycle goes, because recording this, we're like literally 12 days away from Nintendo Switch now.
Yeah, it goes quick, and I mean that wait for the press conference was pretty long, mentally speaking. Like, you'd hear about it every day, but yeah, since then it's just been on full throttle, and I'm sure they're gonna have more announcements right after launch, maybe leading into E3 even, or a Nintendo Direct or something. I had a question, Don.
Sure.
What is your day one plan for the Switch? Are you getting one early?
I'm not getting one early. I might get one from Nintendo themselves on launch day. I'm not 100% guarantee on that. Next to that, I still have my own pre-order. So I will definitely end up with 2 Switches, regardless of that. Because I want to do local multiplayer stuff and what have you with those 2 Switches as much as I possibly can, because it seems like a really cool thing to do. And naturally, I need to have that for review purposes and maybe multiple other examples that maybe I will come up with down the line. But it's definitely important to have, especially as I am my own one-man team from Europe here. But outside of that, it's just picking up the games that I likely won't be receiving. So I know for sure that I still have done any contact with Activision, so it's likely going to me picking up Skylanders and games from the Japanese store that are different, and maybe a few from Nicholas if they don't come out on the first day in Europe. So it's just getting the whole bunch of games and getting content about those games out there. Beyond that, it's getting a few accessories, so an extra pair of Joy-Cons, solely to finish the pairs of the Neon Red and the Neon Blues. Yeah, and I will likely get a special edition of Zelda, which I pre-ordered, and then the Pro Controller, and then I will be done for that day, which is a lot of money to spend in one day, but it's also one of the bigger days in Nintendo's history, because it's the start of a new cycle, and the start of the new cycle I usually treat with a lot of care and respect. That's why I picked up also like a crazy amount of Wii U launch games, because that launch lineup back then was crazy. but it's less so here, so I won't be as spending as much as back then, but it's still conceivably a good amount of money.
Yeah, especially on those accessories, man. That Pro controller is real pricey, and the extra Joy-Cons too.
I don't really feel the price so hard with the Pro controller because I know what's in it. Especially with all the stuff. Well, it has almost all the same features as the Joy-Cons. So it's the HD rumble, it's the gyroscope, it is the NFC reader writer. So for me, I think $70 makes a lot of sense for the extra stuff that's in that controller. It is kind of pricey, I will admit that, but for the stuff that's in that controller, I can also see the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean, as me and you covering the industry and just being in it, we understand how much tech goes into the controller, and it's definitely justifiable. Mm-hmm. It's more, I think, if you're an outsider looking in, or if you're thinking about picking up a Switch and you're looking at the Pro controller, and you've got everything next to the Xbox and PlayStation stuff, and $70 looks relatively pricey, and then the questions start coming, well, what am I getting for this? And we can explain, you got all this, HD rumble is super cool, the NFC, but it's a little harder to justify when you're just looking at the storefront and you got 70 versus 60 or 50 or used controllers or whatever it ends up being. I'm actually personally hoping that maybe there's a third party or something like that decides to manufacture some controllers for it too.
We'll see. I've not seen or heard anything of that front really. So we'll have to see and wait there. But yeah, it's conceivably it's getting stuff out there because I know I won't be able to until launch day. So for me, it's considering my options and seeing what are the best things to make videos for. And that will be likely being a bunch of first looks on the first day, and then making more expensive content on the days directly following it. And even though if that content doesn't exactly do well, it's for me still important to get it out of the door, because it's still the launch of a new console.
Definitely. And I mean, I remember the launch of the Wii U. I waited in line for 6 hours, I think, for it, because if we remember, demand was really high for the Wii U. All the pre-orders were sold out. The thing was sold out in stores for a week or two, in the States anyway. And my pre-order was canceled. I made an online pre-order, and they sent me an email like 2 weeks before the launch. They're like, sorry, we can't fulfill you. And I was very angry, livid. And so I ended up having to go into a Walmart and waiting 6 hours for my console. But it was very exciting, waiting with everyone else until midnight, and got my console, came home. I bought, I think, all of the eShop games, or maybe 4 out of 5. I think there were 5 launch eShop games.
There were 5, yeah.
Yeah, so I got, I think, 4 out of 5, and I picked up the last one later on, and it was just very exciting. You got all these games right away, the new handheld. I was very excited for the Wii U at launch. I didn't, people were crapping on it, but I was actually really excited for the Wii U at launch.
I wasn't too excited for the console because I was more worried about what it would become, and that ended up sadly being true. But I was still excited to play video games. Like, the lineup it had was pretty hefty at launch.
Yeah, I mean, people don't remember, that the first year of the Wii U had minus that drought in the spring. But
there was a drought directly following its launch until March, really, and then after that, it was between March and July that they actually had to wait more for actual Nintendo games to come out, which is not a good sign. But it was Nintendo's call, and I think they made a bad one, especially then touting about how all of these games were still coming in the January Direct. But at the end of the day, they still got released, so that's at least a step above the competition sometimes, who announces games and not releases them anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I think the big thing is the difference between the Wii U and the Switch. And, I was just a naive 15-year-old, or is that how old? Yeah, 15 or 14-year-old when it launched. 15, I think. Maybe it was just me being naive, but I saw all those third-party games, and I was pretty excited. The first year had a lot of third-party games.
Oh, yeah.
And, I saw that. The E3 presentation, I knew it was a new system, so I was very I didn't have problems with the E3 presentation. Everyone, looking back, I see the problems, but at the time, I saw Batman on it, I saw Assassin's Creed, and I'm like, all right, I'm ready for this thing. And I was very excited. I played several third-party games on the Wii U, and it's just unfortunate, really, where it ended up. And you guys, I guess, had more foresight than me, and just me being an excited teenager, I was, I thought there were good things to come. I thought the name was stupid, but I didn't think that would be enough to just kill the console on sight in his first year. And I think that was honestly the biggest mistake they made, was the name.
I think their consistency with software was their biggest problem, honestly. Even if you look now... Okay, I made this point multiple times, but look at the Nintendo eShop, right? Mm-hmm. And look at the games that they've released. None of them, of Nintendo themselves, were all that interesting. And compare that to the WiiWare days and the Zyware days and the 3DS eShop days, and you will see that Nintendo puts out a lot of original software on those platforms and does that with a consistency that feels really right for their own for them promoting their own system and hardware. Where Wii U got 2 NES Remix games, another version of Dr. Mario that I think the 3DS version easily succeeded, and then another version of Pushmo.
Yeah. Yeah, 3DS looking back, you got Box Boy, got Pushmo, Sakura Samurai, I think they're
Harmonite.
Dylan's Rolling Western.
Yeah.
There were a lot of solid games. You're right. I think software is definitely a big concern. Just marketing wise, though, I think that the commercials were bad and all that is true, but I think the name is the thing that was the last thing that just drove the wedge into this console, drove the knife into the console, because we saw advertisements advertising the Wii. We saw not the Wii U. We saw all this stuff happen, and people just weren't aware of it. I remember there's a funny video, I think, that the Game Informer did, and they went around Minneapolis and they asked people, "Do you know what a Wii U is?" Just random people. And the answers you got from the video, if you haven't seen it, I think it's worth looking up. Nobody knew what it was. And I think this was already into 2013, into the next calendar year. Maybe not. But someone thought that Wii U was a Nintendo University, and the U stood for a university. And I'm like, all right, Nintendo screwed up here. Had it been maybe even Wii 2, I think it would have been 100 times better. Maybe people would have known. And ultimately, what killed Nintendo is the first year. And, we got software, which is definitely a huge deal. The fact that they didn't have the software there for the launch and for the months after launch. I guess they did have the software at launch. And then the marketing to drive the sales had the Wii U sold, 12 million in its first year instead of 3 million or whatever it ended up selling. Maybe it would have been a lot more successful in the years afterward.
I don't know. It's I feel that Nintendo never really had fully had a grip on the Wii U, and looking at the Switch now, I feel they know what their market is and what they need to do to accomplish that. I feel want to Switch for all the crap that people give it. I think it's a really interesting game how they use the HD Rumble and the features of the Joy-Cons, especially if you can bring it to parties and with that tablet. And then you have a more core game like Zelda that everybody is excited about, and I think those 2 games make for an interesting combination for Nintendo at launch. And then you see that they have the consistency in place where they at least want to bring out a game a month. And we don't know when Snipperclips is coming out, but Snipperclips is likely the one that will be followed directly after launch. And it also shows that they are dedicated to bringing original content to eShop as well.
Yeah, and I think it'll be... Ultimately, we're going to learn a lot from the Switch launch and the months after that, because you look at the PS4, and if you were to say that PS4 is getting 1 game a month, I don't think that would fly. If you said 1 Sony game a month, that would be huge. There aren't very many Sony games, but the multi-platform games really fill the void, and a lot of people really only buy 1 game a month, or even less. A lot of people buy 1 or 2 games a year, if we're talking about the mainstream market. And for them, it's like it's nice knowing that you have lots of games releasing, even if you're not going to buy them. And it's weird, and we're going to see how that mentality transfers onto Nintendo, because one game a month from a first-party publisher is a lot. That's really good. That is way more than Sony and Microsoft. And it's going to be interesting to see whether they can carry their system without the third-party games, and whether people's psychology is going to, whether they're going to be able to get past the fact that there aren't these third-party games releasing every week. And ultimately, we're going to see what the eShop looks like too. But I mean, it's going to be a test. And if you go talk to your friend Joe down the street that plays Madden and FIFA or Call of Duty, is it going to be enough for him that, he might only buy 1 or 2 games a year too? And it's just nice knowing for him that there are all these other options there too. And will he be able to beat that mentality?
Yeah. I think the system will really get going once Splatoon 2 is out of the door. And I think this is a soft launch, like a test to see how everything will go. And I think that test has actually, in some respects, has been successful, because most of the consoles worldwide have been given to people who wanted it. And there are not many that many left in the grand scheme of things. So I think that they play that part well, but it depends how it will go from the second shipment onward. Will people pick up like a Switch with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or with ARMS, or with Splatoon 2? That's where the real test of Switch will begin. Like the initial test, that's easy. Like most of the people who wanted the Switch now have one pre-ordered. But now getting new people in is the most important factor in all of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I might be at fault of this too. Just the media in general is a little bit at fault, but we place a lot of attention on the launch. But realistically speaking, a launch in March is not that important to keep track of for a system success. They're going to sell out anyway, as you said. Everyone who wants one, had the opportunity at one point to get one, and really we're looking, I think, at after that in terms of success at the September through December period, and that's what happened with the 3DS. 3DS launched, it was pretty much sold out. Everyone who wanted one could get one. Sales crashed after the first 2 to 3 weeks, and then after the software launched, Mario Kart and Super Mario 3D Land specifically, and Zelda, the re-release,
and Monster Hunter 3G in Japan.
Yes.
Let's not forget that. That was a huge thing that happened.
Yeah, and once that software launched and you got the price cut, which was the big baddie there, coupled together, sales took off. And for a period, 3DS sales were outpacing DS sales in the first year. Of course, then it fell off a little bit. But I think that's important to keep in mind is even if the launch, the launch will go great, but even if in those first few months after the launch into the summer, things aren't going great, Nintendo is priced at $300. They could always drop that $50. I think that $250 is more than reasonable for this thing if they needed to do it, and they don't have to. But then you totally said Splatoon, which is going to be huge in Japan. You launch Mario later that year, which will be huge for America. Announce a Pokemon game, if heavily rumored. All of these steps built together, you have a successful holiday, and then you're solid for that first year. I don't think that anyone should be concerned if June NPD numbers come out and it sold 50,000 units. I don't think that anyone should be concerned, or I don't even think 50,000 is realistic, 100,000 or whatever. Nobody should be concerned, because really they can get the ball rolling and build up through the holiday is what's important. The first few months are still building. That's getting the message out to people, so people know what it is, and it's fun, and the people that have it, and you're building a catalog of games for it too. That's really integral. So that way, when you go into the holiday, you're like, all right, we have 5 to 7 solid first-party titles in the system. Great system, and for your day one, when you go buy the unit, you'll have a variety of games to choose from.
Yeah. Though we still don't know anything, for example, say Virtual Console, which is still really concerning to me.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see the numbers on Virtual Console, and I think it's a marketing thing too. The NES Classic sold so well, and if you, I think, framed it the right way and marketed it the right way, it could do so well. People were paying $300 for that thing on eBay. For the Classic. So I think that's definitely a marketing thing too, where they have to market it as like, go back 30 years, to your childhood, blah, blah, blah. I mean, heck, they could probably put in multiplayer to some of these games, split the Joy-Cons, treat them as NES controllers, and have on the couch.
But that's some really powerful imagery. If I can show my parents from, hey, look, especially my dad, look, we can play like NES games with this thing, and we can just sit there and play. That's some really powerful imagery you got there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they gotta make it work for them. You can't just crap these games out on the eShop like they've been doing. They gotta market it, mainstream this thing, make sure there's a steady launch. I mean, you could probably even run commercials, web ads or whatever on the launch of the big virtual console games.
Yeah, I think they definitely should, and hopefully at some point they will start talking about virtual console, but for the time being, they still haven't even said what the eShop looks like, which is not always a really good sign in my humble opinion.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning, and we talked about this a little bit before the show started, but developers have to know where they're selling, the marketplace they're selling. Selling in a bazaar is way different than selling in a Walmart. You've got to frame your products. They've got to have trailers and screenshots ready. They need their thumbnails ready. They need to know what their size dimension. It takes time to prepare these things, and they're fitting. They need to be able to fit their message onto the storefront that they're on. And selling on Xbox Live is different than selling on a PSN. So I think that it's kind of important to get these details out there, and the fact that the developers don't even know what the eShops look like is concerning.
I know for sure that it will be something shiny, because Nintendo always makes shiny web pages as it comes to their eShops. Even the Wii Shop, even though it feels limited now these days, it was still kind of charming the first time you booted it up, because it had news, it had the 4 new icons. It was still interesting to see what it had on offer, and they need to build on that and continue to build on that, and hopefully they will on Switch, because I think that is their strong point, when they market their online stuff in a way that feels important. You actually get the impression that they make it seem like a big deal, these releases.
Yeah, definitely. And I really hope that Nintendo keeps on a lot of these promotions, the indie promotions and stuff that have been happening in the bundles, the Humble Bundle, stuff like that. I think that's all very valuable. And if you coordinate it correctly, and when you know what the eShop looks like, you can start preparing for this ahead of time too. I don't think that it's going to be terrible. I mean, some marketplaces people crap on, but realistically speaking, I think most marketplaces do a solid job of distributing games to people.
I honestly,
so I'm not overly concerned.
In the current landscape, I actually think that the Xbox One on Xbox One is the worst designed one, because it's basically tiles, and the only space they have for promotion is the top, and an option to go to the gold deals, and I don't really feel impressed by that, because I'm not sure what I'm getting when I buy one of these games. PlayStation really makes an experience by making dedicated pages with gigantic images to scroll through, which is sort of awesome. Where Nintendo does it right is making it with tiles. Especially with 3DS and Wii U, you could see how every tile represents a game, and if you go into that game, you would see a couple of trailers, a video, maybe a demo, and then the full download. And then you are really certain what you're getting there. And honestly, that's on Microsoft for making a better store, but that's on them. Ultimately, I think that PlayStation and Nintendo have been really good with channeling indies in that way.
Yeah, I haven't used a ton of the Xbox front, but I think the big thing, the issue that I have with their storefront is the fact that they place so much emphasis on selling things that aren't games, which really annoys me. Like, I'm on an Xbox and I go to the store, and then you've got movies right on the front and other stuff. It's, that's the one big thing too for me. It's not just the design, or not just the visuals and stuff, but the design of like what's at the forefront. But Nintendo's always done a great job of putting their games up front, putting indies up front, and having the categories, action games or Mario games, and I think they're really good at that too.
I only think that Xbox is doing wrong. PlayStation and Nintendo are doing it fine, like absolutely fine, and I think they deserve a lot of props for that. And I think it's good for smaller games that they get that attention and they get the sales they need to continue making games. Talking about Nintendo Switch, so the last couple of days have been dominated with that entire leak thing. And that entire situation was interesting to say the very least. I don't know if you have followed it as much.
Yeah, I mean, not as deeply as you. You're definitely the expert here, but no, I've been keeping track. I watched the video. This situation.
We should explain this, right? So a guy on NewGaf called Hip Hop Gamer. Or was it Hip Hop Gamer?
It sounds about right, but maybe
Hip Hop the Robot. Robot. That was his name. Hip Hop Gamer is that screwy guy who likes to shout at people. No, Hip Hop the Robot. So he posted on NewGaf, "Wow, I got a Switch early. How did that happen? I don't know." And then NewGaf freak out as they usually do. Which is their good right, because hey, somebody has a Switch. And then he decided to make a UI video and then an unboxing video for a different website. Flow Kyo was that website. Right. Yeah.
They're a small YouTube channel.
They are a small YouTube channel, but they got a lot of views on that video. I think 250,000 or something. But most of the views really came from their own website because they uploaded there a day earlier. So they had that amount of content in there, and out of it, like, most people still wondered where this guy got the Switch from, because obviously he got it early, but he didn't get any games with it, and it seemed like a really weird situation. Why would a retailer out of the blue send a Switch early if they know they would get in trouble with Nintendo? It's a really weird, random thing. And at first, again, he said he got it from a retailer, and then it became sort of shady in a lot of ways, because again, where did he get that from? And it's only now today that he said something completely different. Apparently, he sold it to himself from the store he works at. He says himself on NewGaf, and this is the last update that he posted himself, "Well, I'm a barista, and we don't usually carry Nintendo products at the cafe. Well, I'm sure it's frustrating that I can't share more details, but I'm not sure what I can or cannot share. For the sake of clarification, I will say that I don't think the person I got it from knew, and therefore I certainly didn't know, but somewhere down the chain, some Switches had mysteriously disappeared. So while it's unknown to me, once I found out that it had been stolen, I didn't feel comfortable keeping it."
Yeah, I mean, that's weird. And he changed up his story, too. Earlier, he's like, "I think I might sell it to pay for my financial situation."
Yeah.
Too. So, yeah, it's shady. And there's, there are ethical concerns there too, and not only that, but why, the UI is important and everything, but is it important enough to someone to go die on that hill and lose someone down the chain to lose a job? And
it's hard to say, honestly. What it did provide us was a proper unboxing and a look at the UI stuff, which was interesting to say the least, because Nintendo never really gave us that chance. They never told us what the UI looked like. And so we got to see what the tile system looked like. We got to see the information section. The eShop was obviously not up yet because you need a system update together with the micro SD card for that. But he could take screenshot captures. He could sync up the Joy-Cons. He could get information from the system settings. So you got access to a wider range of things and information that we hadn't seen before, and Nintendo was kind of key to keep towards their chest. Was it ultimately a bad thing that we can't see the information from an information standpoint? I don't think so. From a leak standpoint, I would have rather hoped that he kept his mouth shut. Because it's not go for the flow of information. We don't know what Nintendo now is going to do. And I kind of hope that they will clarify a bunch of things that we actually saw in that footage too. But I don't think they will now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two big things is, number one, when something like this happens, Nintendo clamps down. And Nintendo's already a company that does this. Look at their YouTube policy, stuff like this. They like to micromanage everything. And as a result, a lot of the time, gamers are hurt by this. YouTube makers are hurt by this in every step of the process. So when something like this gets out, Nintendo tightens itself, and who knows? Maybe next time when something happens, they're going to limit their shipments, or maybe it means that they're going to be scrutinizing on employees more, or maybe it means that they're going to be completely hiding more information to make sure it's more secretive and limit the amount that people get out, or make the system update larger so that people don't have access to as much of the UI, stuff like this. So I think that's definitely a big concern, is that what's the trade-off here? Yeah, we got some pictures of the UI. I guess that's cool, and it's interesting to speculate what some of this stuff, how some of this stuff is going to work as a result of seeing more information. But what are the consequences of a leak like this in the future and for content producers?
I think the consequence of this is that Nintendo will be less trustful with, say, retailers. Because retailers are ultimately responsible here for the leak that happened upon us. We don't know which retailer, we don't know how it happened, we don't know what actually occurred there. But ultimately, thanks to somebody down the chain, assumably, we now got to see what is up with the Nintendo Switch's UI, which Nintendo themselves never wanted to do. So the information we got was ultimately a good thing, but I don't know at what cost we actually got that information and how it will all end up being. So I do say that it was ultimately a bad thing that it happened, but you can't help but don't look away.
I mean, everyone, that video was making huge rounds, lots of views. Everyone was definitely looking at it, and yeah, I don't know. It's every piece of information is interesting, but realistically speaking, different outlets are already getting their Switches. I think that our Canadian office is getting their Switch next week. This information will be out there soon. Is it really worth it to watch a crappy video done by some amateur a week before you can get that information otherwise? And it's. Yeah, but it is definitely one of those things where, of course, then we watch the video,
Yeah, obviously, because it's the real first glimpse of information that we get since the presentation.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Also, this falls on Nintendo. When you keep so much stuff secretive and hidden away, of course, I mean, the UI is a big thing, but realistically, it doesn't affect that many things in terms of your minute-to-minute play experience. It's not as important as a controller, this or that.
Sure, yeah.
And they turned it into this huge thing. It didn't need to be this way. Had Nintendo, gone over this earlier, made a video about it maybe, whatever it was. We're getting close to launch. Leaks happen. Switch units get out there in the wild somehow, one way or the other.
At this point in the cycle, like 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, we know what the 3DS system looked like. We knew what Wii U system looked like because they had Nintendo Directs. And I think ultimately where Nintendo's to blame here is not having at least a video explaining what all of this stuff is.
Yeah, it's definitely a fault. And part of it for me, I definitely have not. I've been keeping my eyes out as much as I can so that it's more of a surprise on some of these things. I'm picking up my Switch at midnight because I have a bus that leaves for my spring break at 2:30 a.m.
Wow.
So I'm grabbing my Switch and then packing and downloading the system update, putting it in the micro SD card, and I'm on my way on a plane. Literally the way that they advertise to use it. So I'm gonna have the little the Joy-Con set up. I'll have the kickstand set up, and then I'm going on a road trip. So I'll be playing on handheld mode for 10 days before I play it on the TV.
Right.
And thank God that you can charge outside of TV.
And thank God for that video, because we know now that you don't need to dock to do all that stuff.
Exactly. That was definitely really important. And so just seeing from that, I've been trying to keep my eyes away from some of the UI stuff as much, or those leaks. I know that there was a leak also from, was it Nicalis, I think, had a leak for one of their screenshots they had of the developer UI.
And then over talking about developers, we actually got like all of those slides from information from seemingly a development manual. Which the guy who did that wasn't exactly really smart, because he left his IP address in the entire thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But just speaking of all that, it's a shame too when those leaks happen, because I get that everyone wants to, as much information as possible, but the experience of opening up a console for the first time, unboxing it on your own, like, why would you watch an unboxing video? I mean, I get it. I get why we do it.
I know. I watch why I do it, because I make unboxing videos.
Yeah,
but people want to see what an amiibo of that stuff that you get in the box looks like.
Yeah, but then you go and it's like nothing beats the experience. I remember the 3DS, man. I mean, Wii U too, pretty much any console, but 3DS specifically. I remember I went and just opening it up. I didn't even buy any games with my 3DS when it first launched, but I opened it up, calibrating the 3D on that first screen, playing some of the face radar stuff like that, and taking it out of the packaging and smelling it and seeing the AR cards that came with it. I think that's all so important to the experience. That it's a shame when stuff like this goes and ruins it. And yeah, Nintendo can make a video of the UI, but then I can choose not to watch it, and then I open it up. But when you got a video that's a leak, everyone watches it. It makes its rounds. Yeah. It's way bigger deal than it needs to be. And it definitely takes away, I think, something from when you turn on the console on for the first time.
For me, ultimately, that stuff is like whatever. What I'm most disappointed by after watching that video is that the system won't have music anymore.
Oh, I didn't even pay attention to that. Really, that's such a shame. Didn't register with me.
Yeah, after he set up that system and went to the system menu, I noticed there's no main menu music. It's like,
gosh. Huh. Well, I hope that there are themes. Like, it would be cool to have themes like on 3DS, because I would totally, if they could match, I saw your video on the Breath of the Wild theme on the 3DS. It would be cool if they had that on the Switch. I'd totally be down to listen to some
if you look back at that video, like, it said themes. It doesn't say theme, it said themes. And the only two options that were there were the black and white versions. So what I'm thinking, and this might be completely wrong, but I'm just going to go on a whim here and say, yes, the Nintendo Switch has themes, and I hope that they include music with that.
Yeah. And that's so important, too. I've got, I think, a Link Between Worlds theme as the main one I use on my 3DS. And man, I love it. You hear that Zelda music. Like, you turn it on, it's right there, and it's gorgeous. And the music is really an integral part. And even on the eShop, the music is important. You listen to it. They change the jingles during the holiday season.
Yep.
Stuff like that. I think that's really cool, and it definitely adds to the experience. It makes it a pleasant place to visit. You're spending money there.
And it also kind of makes your system experience like a personal one with a theme there. Mm-hmm. Having like a standard slab of white or black is cool for a day or two, but directly after you're like, you know what, I want something else on this system.
Yeah, definitely, and it's cool that they have it, and that they'll at least have it on 3DS, and I hope they learn something, and I'm sure they've been successful. I mean, obviously they don't release sales numbers on themes, but they were a pretty big deal for a little while there after they first launched, and they're still updating. I think the fact that they're still making themes means that they've been a success for them, so I wouldn't really imagine any scenario why they wouldn't bring that to Switch.
Yeah, I honestly think that they will, and it makes a lot of sense for them to do so. That was a long... we had a long string of topics there. We already went through like an hour, which feels incredible. I haven't really even asked what you wanted to discuss, which I usually do at the beginning of a coffee talk, which is crazy, and we are already almost an hour in.
Well, we discussed most of the important topics. I didn't bring any topics. I was like, all right, let's talk Switch. I'm ready. There's a lot of news surrounding it. I think that I think it's exciting to talk about and just to put things in perspective, because a lot of the time when you just see headlines or you just see, you're scrolling down a site, if you don't go in and read those features and really interact with the writers that are behind it, it may seem like there's a sort of, in every industry, it seems like there's a slant, or not even a slant, but a narrative. This is happening about the Switch, and if you just read headlines, that's all you're getting. And I think that talking through these topics is an excellent way to really get behind a subject and analyze it a lot more deeply. Aside from a feature article, and we can talk about the intricate things, like what it really means when a developer doesn't have access to the eShop ahead of launch. What it means when there are leaks, and you really don't get that out of a headline. And I think it's, it was really cool to discuss all these topics in depth because you get a lot out of them. And I got, just not just listening, but talking it through, I think is so important, and I get a lot out of it.
For sure. Have you already went hands-on with Switch, by the way?
No, I actually haven't. There was unfortunately the closest event. There was a media event in Toronto, which is 5 hours for me. There was one in Chicago, but there was none in Michigan, Detroit, or anything like that. So it was not feasible for me to get over to any of these places to try out the Switch, which is unfortunate. I'm not really concerned. I mean, Nintendo managed to make the gamepad feel great, so I'm not too concerned about like ergodynamics and stuff like that. But just out of curiosity, do you think the Switch, the Joy-Cons, are solid design? Could you play for hours on them?
Yeah, I played for about 5 hours in Frankfurt and now 4 hours at a event a couple of days ago. So I almost played 10 hours of Switch now, which feels crazy in a lot of ways. But yeah, it feels like a really nice piece of kit. I am truly impressed with how everything feels about that system, especially the Joy-Cons, because I have huge hands, but they feel sturdy and nice to hold, and you barely feel them once you have them in your palm of your hand, which is fantastic.
Have you tried playing with just one Joy-Con?
Yeah, I have an Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
And it felt just fine in big hands. It still felt fine with the small controller.
Yeah, but with the asterisk that I did put the strap on that always, because the strap feels nicer to hold, and you have two additional more buttons that you can press at the other side of it, which are perfect.
Oh, okay.
But overall, though, it's just toying around with the Switch feels great. I had a really good time with all its features, especially I'm really impressed with HD Rumble. I think HD Rumble is a really cool feature, especially in games like One to Switch. It really elevates that game for me in a lot of ways. And other stuff that have been generally just really good. The only thing that I hadn't played until now was Zelda, surprisingly enough, because it was the same demo as E3, and I made the choice to kind of skim over that in Frankfurt. So I finally got to play that in Amsterdam, and Zelda runs and looks nicer, well, just slightly nicer, but still nicer on Nintendo Switch. So for me, it is a experience that feels comfy and nice to do, and it just looks great. Like, the explosions don't really make you stutter as much as on Wii. So it seems like the thing that I really want to play on there day one. And also, this is a weird side thing, but this is the first Zelda game ever now that we are being able to play in my own language, in Dutch.
Oh, really? They haven't translated the other ones?
No, so this is the first time it has all the text in Dutch, which is crazy. Which means that you can play it in... Which means that, for my cousins at least, I can give them the experience of playing a Zelda for the first time, because they can read all the text, Just the voices are still in English. That won't change. But all the items, all of the stuff that you need to do in the menus, all of the dialogue is translated into my own mother tongue, which feels nuts in a lot of ways, because honestly, for the longest time, and I'm pretty much almost 27 years on this earth, I've always played in English. Can't remember the time that I played in Dutch, outside of the Rare PlayStation game or Xbox game where they forced you to play in Dutch. Like the original Forza Horizon, for how good that game actually was on the 360, I was forced to play that in Dutch because that was the only option on the disc. Which is insane, absolutely insane. And some of the Professor Layton games, especially the fourth one, forced you to play Dutch as well, because there was no English option in the copy I got. So there's definitely that. There's definitely instances where I was forcing myself to play it through my own language, but outside of those rare instances, I had to play in English, because that felt right to me, like the right thing to do most of the time. Like all of my systems these days are in system settings wise are in English because I like to play in English. But it's for right now, it's like the craziest change I've seen to a Zelda game, where I just will be able, or have the option at least, to play it in the language that I want. And I might try it for the first time to see what it is like. It will be weird because I'm just too used to it, but I'm at least willing to try that. And from the moments I've seen from the demo that I got a few days ago, it seems that they at least done a good job, like translating it with the Dutch words and the proper pronunciation of things, which is always an important factor as it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also get the pleasure now of seeing Eiji Onuma on YouTube saying hello everybody, but in Dutch, which is amazing and one of the best moments ever so far of 2017.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think it's important too it's strategic too. Like a launch game, people are picking up this game and coming home. It's definitely a really good impression, and really I think they're shooting for that mass appeal again through that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too not to take anything for granted. You being Nintendo comes into the last generation taking people for granted, thinking that people will put up with anything they slab on, whatever sort of decisions they make, people will put up to it. And I think the big eye-awakening thing about the Wii U was that people didn't put up with it. They just said, "All right, see you later." So the idea of going into every place and not taking anything for granted, not thinking that any territory is going to put up with your crap. No matter where it is, I think is important. And so it's telling, the fact that they're willing to go through the translation, the fact that they're not just going to think that people are going to put up with whatever they put out.
Yeah, they have tried some certain casual games in Dutch. Like, for example, Tomodachi Life didn't get it until a few months later, like a half a year later. And like Wii Sports and stuff never got a Dutch translation because they felt, it was too straightforward. They will get it anyway, But it feels these days that now with Zelda coming into existence with Dutch options, I need to say that again because it even sounds crazy in my head. Mm-hmm. It feels that they're sort of embracing that, which I think is super awesome. Especially for younger people, because not all the younglings like to learn English in that sense. They can play it in the language that they want, which I honestly feel is important to get a larger crowd there.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to talk about maybe a little bit about the power and development of the Switch, since that's something that I've been interested in? I think that if that's okay with you.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I don't think so much the power is important as like how easily it is to get games over to the Switch. And we've heard it really depends on which developer you talk to. I think a lot of feedback has been positive. A lot of developers have said it's really easy to get a game on Switch. And Nintendo itself, I think, said that, we estimate it takes about a year to get a game on the Switch. It's not terribly tough, which I think is positive. I think it's interesting to see. Personally, I don't care about graphics. That's not a big thing for me. And I think for a lot of gamers that holds true. I think it's going to be interesting to see how portable PS4 and Xbox One games are to the Switch if a developer chooses to do that. If the Switch is a huge success, we got to think that third parties are going to be putting their games on the Switch. Why wouldn't they if the install base is large? And I think it's going to be interesting to learn to see how easily this stuff ports over. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same technical level. I don't think that a game has to look as good. And we saw screenshots from, I think, Skylanders, if I remember correctly, comparing PS4 to the Switch, and the Switch version obviously did not look as good. I think it's just going to be important to see in those first few months how games look on the Switch, and then talking to the developers how easy it was to get games ported from PS4, Xbox One to Switch.
Especially with the huge amount of development tools they're currently supporting, and there's still some stuff in development. I think that the Switch has a better chance than the Wii U, because the Wii U was very difficult to port stuff over for, and a lot of people knew that, and they still tried to anyway, but they still had a lot of issues. What I've seen of the Switch so far, especially from developers, and talking to them, is that a lot of the groundwork is already done for them, and they just need to like pull the actual switch, no pun intended, on the actual porting of console elements, and making sure that the game just runs smoothly on that system. And it will be a while before we see what the labor is of that stuff, but it is a really good first indication, and I think the ultimate first indication that Nintendo is listening is the news that Switch development kits will be $500, which is fantastic.
Yeah, Wii U ones I think were what, 3,000?
If you need everything, yeah. If you just need the basic kit, like the most basic stuff, it was $1,500.
Okay, so yeah, and it'll be interesting to hear from some of these indie people too, because I think part of what was unspoken about the Wii U and that people didn't realize is that development was not that easy even for indie games. And if they supported something, say Unity or HTML5, that didn't necessarily mean that the game would be an easy, copy-paste job from PC to the Wii U. Yeah, and I think one of the big issues, for example, when Kickstarter games would get funded for the Wii U and then would get canceled, I don't think a lot of people really appreciated or understood the amount of effort it would have taken to get the games on the Wii U. And a lot of developers I've talked to, specifically of Kickstarter games, said that, the Wii U supported Unity, the Wii U supported HTML5, it supported all these things, and I just assumed that I could get my game over. And what they realized, is a lot of them, is that what putting a game on the Wii U meant was rebuilding from the ground up, and just wasn't feasible. So it's nice to hear so far good things from indie developers, and I'm hoping that this trend continues, where getting a game in the same engine on the Wii U is easy,
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, this system more than anything else makes a good chance of succeeding and making sure that we get that stuff, which it makes me very hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, in a post-credit scene, and this is news that just came hot off the press of NeoGAF. I don't know how much you can call that press. But Hip Hop the Robot actually tried to sell his Switch on Reddit.
Oh, no. Oh, God. How did that end? Is he...
Nobody bought it, I think. So...
Oh, well. Nobody should touch... I think that anyone who picks up that Switch is probably going to get in some sort of trouble. I don't know. I can't imagine you being consequenceless in that endeavor of picking up a Switch before launch.
Huh.
It'd be one thing if you just kept it in your home and didn't do anything about it, but man, this guy would probably get in a lot of trouble for it too.
Oh well, that's your end of podcast story. Hope you enjoy it. We didn't get to go to any questions, but honestly, there was such a good discussion already. I think we had a really solid episode going on.
I think it was great.
I think it's too. I think we were a little serious at the beginning, and then we just went into video game stuff, and I think that's a really nice roller coaster to have. But next time when you're on, we're gonna have about more personal endeavors, what video games do you like and what have you. But that's the problem when you're so close to a new console launch that you really just want to talk about the console launch.
Definitely. I mean, it's fun stuff. I'm sure the listeners like to listen about the new console launch too. They wouldn't. Why would we talk about the NES when we can talk about the Switch?
That's true. For next week, I might do another show where I just talk about my 30 favorite Wii U games. We'll see how that one goes. Which will be an extra episode because I don't try to throw two coffee talks in the same time span. But that will be more like an offshoot episode that doesn't have anything to do, so I can take the week after that off, so I can actually focus on getting Switch content out of the door.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes, and I want to thank you all for listening to Coffee Talk this week. Where can people find you, Elia?
So you can find me on Twitter at Paleselan. That's Paleselan. You can find me on Enthusiast.gg or Nintendo Enthusiast. And then I also have a YouTube channel that I've kind of revived, brought back from the dead. I'll try to have some...
Rise from your grave.
Exactly. I just made a top 10 most anticipated list for Switch games. I'm probably going to do some more content on the indie side of things because I did that with the Wii U when it first launched.
Are you going to challenge Hey Jay and what does Sean call himself on YouTube again?
Retro Gaming Tube 64, I think, or something like that. Retro Gaming Tube 85.
That seems about right. RGT 85 or something. Yeah. That seems like something he would do. The bastard.
Yeah, maybe we'll get something going. But
so get a feud going with those two. Then you will be in the perfect position.
Well, it's funny because Jason and Sean have kind of a feud, but not really. It's not because Sean, I think, has something like 15,000 subscribers, 25,000. I don't remember. Lots of subscribers now. He's only been in the business for a year and a half, so it's been a great success. And then Jason's got like 300, which is about where I'm at right now, 400.
You got to overtake Jason. That's good.
Yeah, it's it's not so much of a feud between those two because it's not even a competition.
Yeah.
So we give
those
Jason
two seem always in a feud though.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so you can check that out. Nintendo Network 64 is my YouTube channel. And I'll try to get more content. I'm still improving and stuff because I haven't made videos in a while. But I think it's good. I got a good editor, got capture software, got a mic. So should be good stuff.
Good. Very good. Anyway, have a nice evening, nice day, nice morning, whenever you listen to this. And goodbye, everybody.
Have a good night.